All right, in this lecture, we want to cover the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon. It is thought that the Song of Solomon is written by Solomon when he was young. Proverbs is written when Solomon is middle-aged. And the book of Ecclesiastes is written when Solomon is an old man and very disillusioned. The book of Proverbs is a collection of Hebrew wisdom. And it is really just sort of not really arranged. It's just simply just compiled together. Solomon is the major author, although there is a man by the name of Agur and also King Lemuel. And we're not really sure who those characters are, but those are both people that wrote some of the book of Proverbs. Well, Proverbs was given by Solomon. It was not compiled by Solomon. It is going to be copied out during the days of Hezekiah, somewhere around over 200 years after Solomon is dead, and placed into its final form. The advice in the book of Proverbs is normally given as a brief couplet of 2 phrases or sentences. But what we want to look at especially is some of the teaching that's found in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs will give us a number of amazing insights into the nature and personality of man. We have statements such as, "Where no counsel is, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety." Just some general information about teachings and about people. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver or gold. So there's a lot of just simple good aspects of wisdom giving there. Proverbs links wisdom and knowledge and education with being spiritual. Understanding or knowledge is not something that is morally neutral. In the days of Solomon, it was considered positive to know God and to know the truth. And so you have such things as the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. You know, in reality, if a person knows everything there is but does not know God, they have failed to know the one thing that is more important than anything else. Just imagine it this way. If you're driving down the highway and you notice that there is a house off to your right and there's flames shooting out of one of the upstairs, the attic window. And you say, "Oh, I need to make sure that nobody's in that house." And so you go over and you pound on the door. Bang, bang, bang. And an elderly gentleman comes to the door and he says, "May I help you? You have just interrupted a very important scientific experiment that I have been making." And you scream at him, "Your house is on fire!" And he looks at you and says, "Please do not disrupt me." And you say, "But you don't understand. Your house is on fire." And he looks at you and says, "I am in the middle of a very important concept that I am discovering, and I would appreciate if you would not interrupt me. Please go your way," and slams the door in your face. Is that man smart or a fool? Or is he both? And let me suggest to you that's exactly where we have a lot of people in our world today. They are brilliant ignoramuses. They know everything there is to know about their field of study, but they know nothing about the most important thing there is. That the house we're living in is on fire and we're headed for hell, and yet they don't care. So, that little statement, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And another place says it this way: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The book of Proverbs teaches corporal punishment, or we could call it spanking, involved in discipline. It says this, a wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes or often. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction driveth it far from him. Our world today views children as not having a basic evil nature inside, and thus they feel like if you will just simply let them grow and develop on their own, they'll turn out fine. The Bible contradicts that, and incidentally, we go by the Bible. And it teaches that children must be brought under. And you're going to have to use sufficiently strong physical punishment to deter them from the wrong direction. I am not advocating damaging a child, beating a child, even though the book of Proverbs seems to indicate that if you have to do so, you would have to do so. I'm just simply saying we must bring children under control. The book of Proverbs talks about relationships in the home. It says this, a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones. It says it's better to dwell in the corner of a house top than with a brawling woman in a white house. And for young people, it gives us this advice. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The book of Proverbs also advocates hard work. It says, go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. It says this, as the door turneth upon its hinges, so doth the slothful upon his bed. That was especially true in an age in which people farmed and had to survive on what they made in their fields. Laziness meant that you were going to starve before the next spring. The book of Proverbs advocates self-discipline and restraint. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. It says this, look not upon wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. The book of Proverbs advocates self-discipline, self-control, and being able to control ourselves. And the book of Proverbs also advocates a concern for the needy. It says this, whoso stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. Let me continue talking about the book of Ecclesiastes. Proverbs is your book of wisdom. Ecclesiastes is written by Solomon as an old man. He is disillusioned. He sees life as simply nothing but emptiness. And the term we see out of the book of Ecclesiastes is this concept. It says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And really what we're looking at here is like emptiness of emptiness. Everything is empty. And Solomon, without God, has tried everything, and he found that nothing satisfies. There's a great philosophical question that is being answered by the book of Ecclesiastes. In Job, it was the question of why do good people suffer. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it is a question, is there any meaning to life? Or what is the meaning of life? What is life all about? Solomon tried everything for happiness. It talks about he tried pleasure. He just simply gave himself to give him everything he wanted. And he had the wealth and ability to do whatever he wanted. And he found that after a certain point, pleasure became totally, totally empty. In fact, those people who party and go to wild parties, the next day they wake up with hangovers. And they find there's not a lot of pleasure there. Solomon gave himself to wisdom and knowledge. And he's going to make the statement of the making of books there is no end. And much study is a weariness of the flesh. I think that one may be one of the favorite quotes of students. Much study is a weariness of the flesh. But if all you're getting is knowledge and learning, you're missing something in life. Solomon gave himself to great building projects. He built the temple. He builds his palace. He builds the house of the cedars of Lebanon. He builds some great buildings. But when it was all over with, in spite of the great architectural things he did, he didn't see there was anything there. He gave himself to riches and was phenomenally wealthy. But his riches didn't satisfy. And you know, one person put it this way: if you ask a rich person, what does it take to be happy? They would only say, oh, just another dollar. But they never get to where they're happy. In fact, being rich means you have to be careful with what you have so somebody doesn't steal it or that you don't lose it. And it just simply would add up to be a lot more worries. And Solomon also tried getting married. And married, and married, and married. I mean, he got 1,000 wives. Or 700 wives and 300 concubines. And young people many times feel like if I could just marry that special individual, I would be happy. Let me put it this way. If you can't be happy single, you will not be happy married. If you can be happy single and you marry the right one, you will find that marriage is a wonderful thing. But marriage in itself will not make you happy. In fact, it will lead to a lot of areas where you can have problems and difficulties. Solomon, at the end of life, he comes to this final conclusion. He tells young people this: remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Solomon is basically saying, I wish I could go back and do it all over again and remember God from the very beginning like I should have. And then he gave this conclusion. He said, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So the question, what is life all about? It's not about us. It's about God. And his conclusion is, keep God where God needs to be in our life. And that is the way to happiness and satisfaction. And then let me briefly talk about the book of Song of Solomon. The book of Song of Solomon, it's a story about a young woman, it looks like, longing for her lover. And a little bit of a dialogue that's somewhat based upon that. And it's perhaps talking about somebody that was brought into the household of Solomon, but she longed for her lover out there in the elsewhere. A lot of it isn't completely clear. And we might even ask, oh, why would this be in the scriptures? It's probably looking at the aspect of love as showing us God's love for his people, illustrating it by the love for a young lady for her lover. And we could say it is a picture of God's love for the nation of Israel, or in modern terminology, we could say it is a picture of Christ's love for the church. Anyway, that is your books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. the wisdom literature that, along with the book of Job, focuses upon those areas.